Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I appreciate your patronage and thank you for joining us on this Sabbath. And I'm honored to have as guests with us today Stan Deyo. And I'm very sure that the audience, many of you that are listening in, that you're familiar with Stan's work. He's been doing this for a very long time, and he's been an inspiration as far as being a truth teller, and I'm sure has enabled a lot of you in your seeking, in your discernment, and your attempts to understand the strange nature of the reality that we're dealing with on so many levels. And Stan, are you there, brother?
I am, Zen. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate you taking the time to join us and to share your insights on, some of the things that are going on in the world. There's so much happening, especially with, the the Boston situation and with the Waco and then I honor you as far as the depth of your knowledge as far as the word and that you've been really warning us about the strong delusion even before all of the ancient alien stuff that has come out and that has so many people right to really accept these ancient aliens as the benefactors and the creators of humanity, and that whole premise has been set up. And I know you've been on the forefront with your book, The Cosmic Code, and the Vindicator Scrolls, and many are also familiar with your wife's work on Dare to Prepare, and all that you do and that Holly does as far as just bringing forth the news, because so many also visit your site and also Steve Quell's site just to keep up with all of the current events and the information that you put forth. So we appreciate, as a group, truth seekers, all the things that you've been doing for the world and, being on the forefront of all these issues.
Well, I appreciate that, Zen. I just kind of did what the Lord led me to do and kind of pulled me into this pathway to write The Cosmic Conspiracy back in 1978. People that have grown up with me know that I don't like to write much, and it was a real labor to write a book about all these things and then to go on and to share that information with so many churches and radio stations in the years that followed. But anyway, You do what you're supposed to.
Absolutely, and I was only 8 years old at the time, so you were way out in front, and before most people were even discussing these issues, and with the availability of the internet and the immediate access that we have in this, the Generation X, where kids of today can just basically keyword search anything, typing it into a search bar and clicking search and having all this millions of bits of information come up, and not having access to that and writing all the material that you did previously, I'm sure it was a lot more difficult in pulling forth all the different resources.
Well, for your listeners that are younger than I am, I'm 68 now, but when I was writing that book and living the experiences before that, and for a decade or so after that, maybe even 2 decades after I wrote the book, I didn't know what an internet was, never heard of it, and didn't even actually start seeing the internet until around 95 or 96. So, yes, it was more difficult than it would be today to get information. You'd have to mail off to various places to get confirmation of data you were trying to print or put in the book, and photocopy it. And we did have photocopiers, but some of them were pretty old-fashioned. But yeah, today's generation has so much information at their fingertips in so many different ways electronically, and that I marvel that they don't understand more about what I've been trying to tell them about. They can check so much of it now and see what I was telling back, in the early 70s is happening now. It's true.
Absolutely. Very prophetic as far as your writings. Well, Stan, can you tell the listening audience a little bit about your books, and then we can talk a little bit about your background, and then I'll get you to comment on, the recent situation as far as Boston and Waco, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, the good Lord certainly led me into a good partnership, a good marriage with Holly. She is a trained writer, and that's her degree in English and stuff from university. She has written a book that all of her life she was being prepared for, much as I was for my book. Her book is called Dare to Prepare, and my book is called The Cosmic Conspiracy. Now, between the two of them, we discuss 2 different methods of preparation that people need to do to face what is coming to the earth in the next few years. And it is to be able to endure physically and spiritually the things that are confronting us. The most important, of course, is the spiritual one, because we know that we all die eventually, whether it be 30 years from now or 7 years or 2 years or tomorrow from now. So, first of all, we suggest that you understand what is going on, which I can talk a bit about in a minute, between the heavens and the earth, and where God dwells and where man dwells. And then, secondly to that, to endure until our Messiah, Yeshua ben Elohim, Jesus in the Greek, does come for his bride, the church, which we think is happening very soon, within 2 or 3 years. But that's just our opinion. Anyway, we write these 2 books and we sell them as a package or individually, but to help people prepare storing food, medicines, having access to water, how to defend themselves and their families physically until the return of the Messiah. And then, in the meantime, should they face death and actually die for some reason, to be spiritually prepared. So, between those 2, we reach out to a lot of people to prepare them as best we can. Everything Holly's put in the book, virtually everything we have tested or tried or bought or done to be sure that it's good advice to people. She's put in that Dare to Prepare book a lot of stuff about the experiences we had where we did something incorrectly in what we have asked them to do and prepare, and what pitfalls to look for, and how to correct things that are common errors. And the same thing in the Cosmic Conspiracy book, from a spiritual point, from a political point, from a technological point. Now, gosh, back in 1978 when I first printed the Cosmic Conspiracy, if you think talking about UFOs and aliens today is a bit strange, believe me, in 1977, 78, it was really strange. And try to do that in churches, which all mean well, study the Word and stuff, but some of the churches, the Spirit-filled churches like the Assemblies of God, and in Australia, the Churches of Christ, they did understand what I was saying and didn't, go, oh, this guy's crazy. They understood about the coming conflict with beings that purport to be aliens, and they're really just the fallen ones coming with their leader, Satan. Now, this may sound a bit churchy to people, but believe me, this is what is happening, and I can probably speak with more authority than most people that you would hear about the life after this, because I nearly died once and was out of my body and prepared for the long rest I was going to have in the grave, sleeping, until I met with the Lord. So I got to see a few things out there, and the Lord showed me a lot and prepared me to eventually come back alive, into my body. And about, about 7 or 8 years later, to be writing this book, The Cosmic Conspiracy, and some 12,000 miles from my home in a foreign land. Sometimes I feel like that mythical character, Ben-Hur, Judah Ben-Hur, in the movie. But anyway, it is important for us to understand what this great deception is and how we must prepare for it almost immediately. Those of you that watch TV and DVDs and stuff like that and go to the movie houses, and since 1976 or 7, somewhere in there, have seen movies and series on TV like V, and like Independence Day, 4th of July, and any of the movies that have come out that show aliens invading Earth, some of them being friendly or some of them not being friendly. But if you've been raised in that generation seeing all these things, then you've been conditioned to look at the possibility of alien intervention here or invasion to planet Earth as a possibility. It's no longer science fiction, it's science probability. The trick is going to be, as some of our leading astrophysicists have said, is to be sure that you want to draw attention to yourself to these alleged alien races. They might not be benevolent. They might be like Independence for the people or beings where they want to come to consume our resources and us, or like V, where they come looking like humans but are really reptilians dressed in some sort of human-like clothing and skin to fool us. There are a number of these plots that have come across. And I think probably the one that I relate to the most as being closest to the truth is the series and the movie V, where the alleged aliens come down to Earth and say, look, you guys are having trouble. You've got disease and warfare, and we can help you. You know, we can supply you with technology and understanding of our ways that we've perfected over the years, and we'll help you bring peace to your planet. In return, we'd just like to get some of your water and stuff into our ships and take them back to our planet. Now, that's the premise of the story. Now, the guy that wrote these things, Kenneth Johnson, when he wrote the books that the movies were based on, he put into it a lot of biblical prophecy in a secular or worldly way so that people would not be turned off and would watch the whole story and be prepared for what's about to happen in our lifetime, in real life. Now, in the movie, these critters that look like humans but were really reptilian underneath even ate people. I mean, they were pretty vile creatures. The Earth people did eventually run them off, and in the books, in the series by Kenneth Johnson, the last one hadn't been made into a movie yet, but it does show a third alien race more powerful than these nasty critters that came, looking like humans but were really reptilian. The third race gets rid of those bad reptilians entirely by, some special power that they exercise to kill them. But before the last race came, the humans used dehydrated extract of the blood from a child that was a result of a union of these alien critters and a human. And he was trying to draw a parallel to Jesus himself, being half man, half God, half human, half God, and that his blood was shed for us, and those covered in the blood were protected and saved. Well, in the V movie, they make this dehydrated powder from the blood of one of these children that died. There was a product of the crossbreeding of the reptilian people and the humans, and they spread this. They replicated this dust, and this blood red dust, and they put it all over the planet, and this got rid of all the bad reptilians, and in essence, the world was saved by the blood of this hybrid being. Now, it's a loose connection, and it doesn't follow Scripture exactly, but that's where it was headed in a secular manner in the script. Today, the real thing that we're seeing is this. Satan, since the very beginning of his challenge to the authority of God in the heavens, in the levels above us in the parallel universe, has maintained that his way of running things as a dictatorship is better than the way God runs the heavens. And we know that there's disagreement in heavens. The angels fought, God's angels and Satan's angels. And this will happen again shortly in front of us, probably. But because of this disagreement, this argument between God and Satan, he said, let us not fight this battle between us for authority here in the heavens where they live, all around us, but in a higher energy density. Let us create a virtual courtroom, a virtual test of your theory of how to run things versus mine. And we'll do that on Earth. We'll make the Adamic man, and we'll create a whole race of beings that are that have the spark of God in them and communicate with me. And we will see how they live under your rule. So in the Garden of Eden, Satan got Adam and Eve to break with God, to no longer be communicating with him, and to go his way. And he violated the rules of this courtroom many times with the interbreeding he had his people do with humans in the courtroom down here. And this has happened before and after the flood, with giants being the offspring of the Nephilim and things like that. Now, this is coming to a head where the battle being fought here can cost lives and stuff, which does not hurt where God lives in the beings with him. They stayed with him during the rebellion. But on Earth here, what we're going to see is a last great deception for the remainder of mankind on the planet, and it started probably 50 years ago and is now coming to a kind of like an end of the show, or the last act of this deception, if you wish. And it basically hinges around this alien presence on the Earth and the fact that we have bad, harmful aliens, the little gray critters and tall gray critters that abduct people and mutilate cattle and livestock. And this has been going on for, say 50 or 60 years, and people have been gradually more and more frightened by the possibility that these things are true and these alien critters are meaning to harm us. And yet, in the present time, the good aliens, the Nordics, the ones that look like humans and are taller and better looking, they will appear to come to mankind in large ships with advanced technology that people will just be amazed by. And that's going to happen in our lifetime in the next, I think, probably year or two. And they will say, look, you're on the edge of a nuclear war in the Middle East and worldwide after that. You've got diseases like, the avian flu that are running rampant. Your economy is in a shambles worldwide. And you have trouble with the sun, and the crops aren't working, droughts and extreme climate changes are underway. Your magnetic north and south pole are drifting and going to invert. You've got problems that we can help you with. They're saying this to mankind in general. And they say, look, let us set up a government for you, a world government. We'll put one of your people in charge and teach him how to organize your planet and to use the technology we give to him to save you from all these terrible things and to keep you safe. It will give you peace and safety under our rule, and we'll get rid of all those little gray and tall gray critters, those bad aliens that are from some other part of the solar system or the universe, and we won't let them afflict you any longer. We'll be protecting you. And at the time this happens, people will be hungry, they will be sick, they will be frightened, and they will be fearful of nuclear war. Yes, they will look at that as an opportunity, any opportunity other than the obvious death that lays ahead of them if nothing is done about these various crisis curves. So Satan will fool those who do not see what he is doing. And the reason myself and others are warning you about this in advance of the actual event happening in the next couple of years is this. If we were to wait until the deceptive alien messiahs come to help mankind and to prove that they are the creators of mankind, and they're not, when they come, if we were to stand up then and say, oh, don't believe this is a lie, it would be like sour grapes. Like we'd be saying that because it conflicts with our viewpoint, and we don't want people to follow this allegedly good alien race. So we have to say it way in advance to know that the word comes from the Word of God, and that the warning is good and valid and should be listened to by everyone that hears this or reads it. Do not be fooled by the fake arrival of God. It'll be a little God. It'll be Satan appearing to be our creator. And we'll have technology and information and videos, even probably even holographs, all the way back to the Garden of Eden, to the crucifixion, and we'll show these to the people of Earth to convince them that Lucifer was our creator, and that's going to be a lie. But this is the great deception that many of the churches have not been aware of. They just didn't have enough knowledge at the time to put that together with Scripture. But now then that we are in this age and seeing these things on TV and reports and the real reports of UFOs and aliens and that kind of stuff, the churches, even the Vatican, is having to come to grips with the fact that we're going to be meeting aliens shortly. So that's the main thrust of the cosmic conspiracy, is to warn you that not only does mankind have the technology to fake an alien invasion, there is an alien invasion coming by Satan and his minions. So don't be fooled by this, and pray that you're found worthy to be taken to be in a rapture before this takes grip on the earth. That's it, Sam.
Well said, Stan, and for you to have summarized all of that, I mean, so long ago, is just really prophetic in nature. It's my opinion also that they're going to say that the missing link, because they're trying to push the theory of evolution as well, that they're going to say that missing link is the ancient aliens and their interdiction as being what jump-started the evolution of humanity, and that's why we can't find that piece of the evolutionary puzzle. I think that will also be part of the evolution.
Well, then God himself created the Adamic man as a different sort of man. Remember that Adam and Eve's son Cain went out to a foreign land and took a wife from a human population out there. They weren't the spirit-filled. They weren't the God-created model of man. So there were humanoids of some sort out there running around either in North Africa or Saudi Arabia, somewhere in that area, or even old India when it connected to Africa. There were beings that were capable of reproducing. That's who Cain took for a wife. And he ended up in India, in the Indus River Valley. But so God himself has interrupted what would be an evolutionary chain. And the only difference is that Satan will say he did it instead of God. I just wanted to correct what you're saying here, because there is that break. There is no missing link. There's a jump. And God himself made that jump to create the Garden of Eden. Right,
absolutely. Do you also think that, with the prophecies of Malachi and this supposedly the Pope Francis as being the Petrus Romanus, that the introduction, the false prophet, the introduction of the Antichrist, Apollyon Abaddon, that he also will be supernatural and connected to the whole ancient alien premise, and that will be part of the strong delusion as well?
Oh, I think so. The Vatican is now, like the Pope is the first time they've had a Jesuit Pope, and he's sitting on the throne of, there was kind of a division within the Catholic Church. You had the white Pope, which was the one everybody knows about in the Vatican, and then you had the black Pope, who was the head of the Jesuit order, who were a pretty strong-armed scientific militaristic branch of the white Pope's Catholic believership. And there were different objectives for the Jesuits versus the normal Catholic Church. Now, when this Jesuit Pope took over the seat of Peter there, of the Pope in the Vatican, he joined those two forces together, and one of the tenets of the Jesuit order is to return all Protestants and evangelicals to the fold, to make them follow the Pope. And that's been their objective for generations now. But we have a problem in that he will want to make everybody unify into this new one-world religion. And since 1977, I have seen printed evidence and collected it, showing that the Catholic Church, or the Vatican more appropriately, has been holding conferences worldwide to unify Islam, Catholicism, Judaism, all this, to unify it into a global religious order with common beliefs. And they've been engineering out those beliefs that were not common, so that they were no longer important to the various religions they're talking about. So this Pope could certainly be the one. He has in place underneath him, he has the infrastructure and the ideal to make a one world religion that will transcend all religious sects and unify them into one. And that's what will happen, according to the Bible, in the last days. So he will then, as the head of that, point to the alien appointed leader of this planet, Satan's appointed leader, but alleged alien, and he'll say, follow him. He is the chosen one of, our Creator, and he will be talking about Lucifer rather than the real God, whether he knows it or not. But this Pope here has stepped into the shoes of a very interesting position in this time in our history, and he's going to definitely be involved in prophetic fulfillment just by the very acts that he does to turn our eyes toward the skies, toward the aliens.
Absolutely. Where do you see the connection with Nibiru or Planet X? And because we know that the Vatican has the Lucifer telescope, and that they're watching for the arrival of this particular what some may refer to as wormwood. How do you see that all? Do you think that with its arrival, that possibly that will be the point where we have the false alien invasion and a possible introduction then of this particular Apollyon Abaddon?
I think so, and I've been checking with the website of the Vatican's telescope there at that the point where you're talking about, that Lucifer infrared telescope. It's a stereoscopic telescope. They actually did not name it. The Germans who built the telescope did, and there are several groups, including the Vatican, that share that astronomical facility there. So the Vatican is saying that they wouldn't have named it Lucifer, but that the builder of the telescope did, and so they have to honor that. Now, whether that's just a sidestep issue or not, I don't know, but we've got to be as truthful as we can about that Lucifer business, and I don't think that openly anyway that the Vatican endorsed naming it that. They are looking at something, all of them, the various groups using that particular observatory, at the southern skies as best they can, but they're looking for something out there that could be a planet, the rogue planet or the 10th planet that for so many years that NASA and various astronomers have said does exist. I have not seen any information, any photographs yet that convince me that this object is visible. And if it is not visible, it might be because it's only got a heat signature. You need a very sensitive infrared to see it. I don't know, but I'm not convinced that it's here yet. Although, having said that, I know that there is a stable orbit around our sun for a planet to occupy way out beyond the farthest planet, out beyond Pluto and beyond the Kuiper Belt. And this orbit, if there is a planet or a moon or a star or whatever there, orbits the sun every 3,600 years, plus or minus about 10 or 11 years. Now, that would fit the tale of a Nibiru, from the Zechariah Sitchin translation of the Sumerian documents. It would fit that time period and the Mayan calendar time period. So I'm not going to say definitely no, it's not there. I'm just going to say that I haven't seen anything yet that proves it to me positively today or before today. I'm keeping an open mind on that now. Okay.
Do you think that the tohu wabohu that has any connection to what the Sumerians and also the Enuma Elish? It describes how this particular planet became part of our solar system, and it also speaks about a conflict with the planet that used to be where the hammered bracelet or the asteroid belt is now. Because the reason I ask about this is it also speaks about in Genesis as this particular planet having had a watery canopy. And I was wondering if the destruction of that planet and it having been shifted in orbit to where the Earth is now, if that was what actually caused the destruction of that watery canopy, and also what made the stars in the celestial heavens appear, so that the calendars and the time and the ability to track time, all of that then became possible.
Well, it is quite possible that we did have a water vapor canopy. It certainly would not have been enough water in that to make the great flood, say, of Noah, thousands of years later. But we could have had a canopy. We could have had a water, gaseous water, like a water vapor canopy. Now, if we had enough that it was condensing into cloud layer, then that water canopy would have definitely shielded us from seeing the stars and the moon and the sun and that kind of stuff directly. The sun would have been an indirect bright light, but that's about all we could have seen, or perhaps something of the moon, because it was close enough through that kind of a shield. Now, the Tohu Bohu does speak about the Earth had become waste and void, so that the Earth had been at some previous time, doesn't say how many in the Hebrew, how many years or thousands of years before it had been a working, viable, biosphere. At that time, it might have been when Satan and his people were crossbreeding with the humans on the planet. Perhaps the legend of Atlantis occurred during that time, before the Genesis account. But anyway, the canopy itself, back to that seemed to be what your main question was about. The water canopy, once the clouds became rain and did contribute to the flood of Noah, because there would still be a lot of residual water that hadn't condensed into rain in the atmosphere, it would have made the atmosphere a much better lens, like a telescopic lens all around the planet, so that we could see stars and formations with the naked eye that we can't see today because the water is gradually condensing and going down into the surface of the Earth and not returning to the canopy that we were talking about. So it would have been a lens effect, certainly, as mankind developed, they could see the stars in great detail. And I'm sure that's why the ancient astronomers in the early days, time of Enoch and before, would have named the constellations and then named the stars within those constellations to put a map in the heavens by name and by star position to tell us about the grand cycle, the 25,000-year cycle, or 26,400-year cycle, that the Earth does as it rotates around the North Star. And the whole Bible, the whole witness of Jesus, the birth, and then the final returning as the king, the lion, all of that is written as a message in the stars and the names of those stars in their host languages. So it's very important to know these things, and I do think that the canopy was there, but the main water for the flood came from underneath the dirt of the surface of the Earth, about 5 to 15 miles beneath the surface, where we have discovered a shell of water that's more than enough to flood the Earth right up to the highest mountain. And today we know it as the Moho-Ravitch discontinuity, or the Moho in short form. And that's what the Bible said was broken up and pushed hot water up into the oceans during the rest of the 110 days of flooding after the rain stopped and the condensation of the water canopy stopped. It was the water underneath that came up, but now it's gone back down under the surface. And so scientists today can't see enough water on the planet to have made it cover the mountains. And they also don't consider the fact that at the time that happens, before Peleg, that the Earth was 25% smaller in diameter than it is now, and would therefore have been able to cover the mountains with much less water than they calculate now.
Berosus, the Chaldean historian, he speaks about a time when the fallen ones were creating and manipulating the DNA, and that they were crossbreeding creatures so that there were men with wings. It even speaks about how there were men that had fish's tails. The hippocentaurs are also mentioned, and he speaks about all these different mythical kind of combinations, men that had dog's heads, sort of like what is seen also in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Do you think that the Father, that he created Adam and Eve as a judgment against the fallen angels for trying to create a slave race and for trying to make like a fit extension, and that was one of the reasons that he brought forth Adam and Eve as a special creation?
Well, the God of gods, the Elohim, did find fault with what Satan did here on the earth. Now, if it was because of the breeding of chimeras, with the genetic manipulation, and if it was to create a slave race, that is definitely not the way God organizes the heavens. And that might have been the reason for Satan being put to trial here on the earth over the last, say, 6,000 years since the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was created by God to make a fair courtroom decision for all, rather than just punish Satan and lock him up and or take their lives of him and his followers. God said, I have given my word not to do that, but I will show you how you are wrong and how you will be put away, so you can't harm the rest of us because you are going against the perfection of the order that I've established. And that's why the Garden of Eden was set up. And as I said, that's also why Satan has done everything he could to pervert the outcome of this virtual courtroom that we're living in. Many times in the Scriptures we have seen where it refers to earth and the life that we know as not reality. It is not in the heavens where the Elohim dwell. We've only just recently, in the last 30, 40 years, started to understand what virtual reality is and how you can have avatars living in these virtual worlds. And we are, in essence, avatars, some of us which will side with God, the Elohim, and others who will not, sadly a much greater number. And they will not continue after the virtual reality is shut down. But only those who have accepted and signed on with Yeshua, our doorway to the Elohim, will be given permanent life in the heavens that are around us. They will act as priests and kings, I'm sure, when they return with the Messiah for the 1,000-year reign here. After that, there's all kinds of interesting things that happen to our entire universe. But anyway, these things are there in the Scripture, if you look at them, particularly in the Hebrew, that tell us what has happened and why this virtual reality has been set up to judge Satan.
Can you tell us about the war in heaven and how you see all of that unfolding and how it led to our embodiments in flesh here now, and this being a fallen world, and we're in kind of a fallen state of being as well?
Well, I think I've probably addressed that maybe indirectly in what I've already said in the program, but basically there was a disagreement between the Elohim and Lucifer, who became Satan, because he challenged the authority of the Elohim to limit his activities here on the earth in doing something that was not in God's will, in the will of the Elohim. But being fair, the Elohim have decided to try Lucifer, Satan, in this virtual courtroom, which has been running since the Garden of Eden until now, and will continue to run for another 1,000 years. Even during the millennial age, there will be a resurgence of people still supporting Satan, and there will be one last conflict at the end of that time, and then when that happens, the courtroom is finished, Satan is judged, and he is cast down and disappears, from bothering anybody any longer, he and his minions. Now, I don't know any more details about what happened in the war in the heavens other than what we can get out of Scripture, but definitely there was free will in the heavens, there still is, and exercising his free will, he tried to destroy free will by enslaving not only the beings here on the earth, these hybrid beings, but also extending that kind of rule to the heavens themselves. And, God came as Yeshua, the hybrid son of man and God. And Yeshua, to be the greatest king, has become the greatest servant of all, to lay down even his life, at the very lowest level of human existence, to lay down his life to redeem us and to bring us into the heavens. And that kind of leadership is not dictatorial. That one is a relationship of love for the beings that are in your creation, and a willingness to serve them rather than to dictate to them, to show them the wisdom of your way rather than to force it on them. And that's the only way a harmonic system can exist and endure.
Right. And that's why, all the Ten Commandments are to show us how to share and to love one another and to look after each other, instead of being selfish in our ways and to seek out self-glory, because that's the way of Lucifer, and that's part why we see so much chaos and so much evil present within this world, where we're learning through the duality of good and evil. There's a question from the chat room. Watcher Ruth wanted to ask you if you could comment on the ley lines and their effects and how they influence us.
Well, the ley lines, are a series of kind of parallel lines that run across the face of the earth in a spiral from north to south. And these ley lines, I think they do reverse their vectoring in the south pole toward the equator, as well as the north pole toward the equator. But the way I understand these things is they are part of the gravitational field that forms this planet and the magnetic field. And what happens, and I can't really explain this without showing videos or things like that. I can't explain it easily, but a paper I've been working on to explain how gravity is really a two-dimensional or a two-vector force. It's not just one directional toward the surface of the Earth. It reverses inside the Earth and comes back up toward the surface inside the planet. And because of that, it forms overlaid fields of, inertia, if you wish, which if you look at it as lines, the inertia is the highest. There will be overlaying things that form a grid work. If you look down through the surface of the Earth, one set of lines going one way on the surface, the other set of lines almost at 90 degrees, but not quite to the one on the surface. And that forms this kind of grid work pattern. Now, as far as how these things generate energy that affects us, I don't know. I've read a number of philosophical discussions on it, and things that are not well documented as far as scientific fact, but could very well be evidenced by animal and human behavior. As far as energy, I do know that we can theoretically obtain electricity from gravity waves, which are formed by this spiraling field I'm talking about. And that might be what happens, is that plants are, living tissue that falls along those lines, or within certain ones of them, somehow can convert that energy into a form of energy they use in their body. I don't know. But that's the best I can give you, because I've never been able to prove, to my satisfaction anyway, that these ley lines do influence mankind or, plant growth or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that animals are certainly aware of the subtle energy and can sense all of that. Can you comment, Stan, on why it is that the fallen ones, in building the various sites, the megalithic structures that we find all over the world, why it is that they utilize the pyramidal structure, and why it is that they might be aligning to certain star systems, to certain alignments in the heavens?
I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. I've never seen anything, again, to my satisfaction, that proved that the pyramidal structure was some sort of a magic energy device. It might be, but I've not seen it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm not positive on that either. I do know that they've looked into, somehow that the pyramids can keep seeds and keep them, sustain them longer, but I'm not exactly sure as to how all that unfolds as well. Can you tell us about your personal your research into anti-gravity and your interest in some of these alternative energy devices, free energy, and if you would just speak a little bit about your background, Stan, because some of the listening audience aren't aware that you have been involved in the Black Ops projects, or if that's and that you've had high level security clearance. If you could just speak a little bit about that as well.
Well, I suppose then if I go back to the beginning of my involvement in the alternate energy and propulsion technology, that would be the best place to start. Back in, 1969, I nearly died and had an out-of-body experience and was shown a great deal about how things work out there before it came back into my body. Sadly, a lot of it fell off as I re-entered my body. It fell off to the side, and I couldn't recall it immediately. But things started to happen within a year or so of that, and I started to have dream visions of how to solve things, how to make gravity work, how to make a flying saucer. And so I started in Dallas there, outside a suburb called Mesquite. I started, doing some tests to see how magnetism and gravity interacted, and to see how I could make a flying saucer that used circulating charged or ionized air plasma. And that was easier for me to prove at that point and to make a patent application for, because it wasn't anti-gravity at that point. Now, before I could file my patent, somebody found out what I was doing in town where I was working in the computer business, and they told someone else that told Dr. Edward Teller, who was in charge of a very secret international scientific project to develop technologies like anti-gravity and other things as far as molecular physics to impress mankind in what was to come later in this grand deception. Now they recruited me. They came and told me, look, we've got anti-gravity. We're ahead of you there, but we'd like for you to join our team. And come to work for us in Australia. And we have bases. They said they had to show me photographs of inside of a submarine where Dr. Teller and Dr. Maxfield, who was my recruiter, were sharing a bottle of champagne as they went under the pole and into the New Schwabenland base, I guess. But they didn't say which base they were going to. You had to reach it by submarine under the ice pack. Now, the trip down to Australia, I was down here, and I worked with them for a couple of years in the group. And my control agent was Captain Sir John Williams in Melbourne. He was part of the Illuminati that were controlling Australia at the time. These people had scientific research facilities underground, under ocean, in a lot of places, inside mountains, in ways that you could never actually get to unless you tunnel bored into it, because they had ways of moving through solid material and reappearing in hollow cavity bases inside these places. So you wouldn't sneak up on it like Area 51. Now, they had these places, these facilities in the United States, Australia, New Zealand had some stuff, not as much because it was geophysically not a safe place. Germany, some of the old World War II bunkers that Nazis had built were used and refurbished to do research. Canada, Norway, United States, Great Britain, even Russia had some facilities. I don't know how many because they parted from the group early in the game. Dr. Teller was also known as the father of a hydrogen bomb, and his equivalent rank in the Russian participation of this program was Dr. Andrei Sakharov, who was kept in the country in Russia and was not able to accept his Nobel Peace Prize in physics because they didn't want to let go of him. They wanted to keep him there in Russia with the knowledge he had of what we were doing. Now, as I say, I was taken down to Australia. My family and I, we were moved down to Melbourne, and then about 2 years into the game, I became very disenchanted with the political philosophy of the facility I worked for, the group, and I wanted to share some of the free energy technology that I'd seen that they had developed to power these 30-foot diameter craft. I wanted to see them share that with countries that had no water and no power out in the boonies, where people lived in deserts or in very infertile land, so that they could somehow survive and get fresh water and make things grow and could feed themselves. And when they told me there in the group that what they really wanted to do was to kill 100 million people or more just by withholding grain loans and various other means, and certainly technology, that they didn't want to help people like that. They wanted to kill them off because they were of a different philosophy and a different culture. And then I found out, fairly early in the game too, that they didn't like Jews inside the organization, and somebody had failed to tell them my father was, Jewish. So there were a number of things that determined that I should leave their company. And when I became more vocal about disagreeing with various things, they decided that maybe I'd be better off at the bottom of a mine shaft, a few thousand feet below the earth, and no longer alive to make a problem. So I ran and managed to elude them for about 6 months and get to a safer place over the western side of Australia, and that's eventually where I was led to write that book, The Cosmic Conspiracy.
Are you aware of the Emerald Tablets of Thought, Stan? Or have you read those?
Haven't read them. I have heard mention of them. Why don't you tell me a bit about them?
Well, well, in the Emerald Tablets of Thought, it's supposedly written by an Atlantean priest king who speaks about the fallen angel involvement in not only in building certain of the megalithic type structures, but he speaks about how they had also developed some of these underground bases, and that some of these bases were, old, and that the current bases that were being built by our governments around the world, that they were actually building on top of and into some of these ancient structures, and that some of the like the tunnel systems that connect the different parts of the world, that they were the ones that also put into place some of these structures. But I wanted to get you to comment on, because they speak about their association to what we call the Nakash of Genesis chapter 3, where it speaks about the serpent as beguiling Eve. But I wanted to just read a real quick passage and then get you to comment on this, because it also speaks about there being interdimensional type beings, and that they were reptilian, and that they were able to take over, to possess those that sit on the thrones of the world today. It speaks about how they crept into the councils of man, and that they are, holding form and connected to the royals, the blood royal elites of the world. So, especially since you haven't, associated these texts to the Nakash in this particular way, I think it would be interesting for you to hear about this, and then I'll get you to comment on it. This is from Emerald Tablet number 6. It says this: far in the past, before Atlantis existed, men there were who delved into darkness, using dark magic, calling up beings from the great deep below us. Forth came they into this cycle. Formless were they of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earth men. Only through blood could they have formed being. Only through man could they live in the world. In ages past, were they conquered by the masters and driven below to the place whence they came? But some there were who remained, hidden in spaces and plains unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. When the blood was offered, forth came they to dwell among men. In the form of man moved they amongst us, but only to sight were they as men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men. Crept they into the councils, taking forms that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their forms and ruling over men. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and to rule in his place. But know ye the masters were mighty in magic, able to lift the veil from the face of the serpent, able to send... I'm almost done here. Sorry. Okay, able to send him back to his place. Came they to man and taught him the secret, the word that only a man can pronounce. Swift then they lifted the veil from the serpent and cast him from his place among men. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth in a place that is open at times to the world. Unseen they walk among thee, in place where the rites have been said. Again, as time passes onward, shall they take the semblance of men. Called may they be by the master who knows the white or the black, but only the white master may control and bind them while they are in the flesh. And that's actually from Emerald Tablet number 8. But can you comment on that?
Well, first of all, Zen, who wrote the Emerald Tablets?
I have no clue. It says that, that it was the supposed Atlantean priest king named Thoth. They also attributed.
Wait a minute.
To be...
Spell that name. Is it Thoth? Are you saying Thoth?
Yeah, Thoth, and there's also the Emerald Tablets of Hermes. So, supposedly he's one of these pagan gods.
Well, now, the Emerald Tablets, as I recall, were attributed to not only Thoth, but Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, 3 times king. In other words, his whole name was Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, and that would have been where you're talking about the Emerald Texts, or Emerald Tablets. Now, Again, I say we need to know where those came from. If they were from automatic writing or something like that, then I don't trust them at all. But Isaac Newton did look at them and found them of value. So he, being a very devout Christian and interested in prophecy, must have seen some value. But other than that, having not studied them, I do know that they're part of the mystery schools and possibly part of the Kabbalah art. But I don't know. Until I can prove that it's a valid writing somehow, that it's not a deception or part of the deception by Satan, I'm a bit reluctant to comment on the validity or how it ties with the Bible just at this point. I'm flying a bit blind. Anyway, somehow we need to know where he got those. Where Isaac Newton. I mean, these things are from alchemist tradition. They're not like from Christian tradition and normal physics. And because it was written in Arabic between somewhere around the probably between 800 and 600 A.D. I think it was. Yes, A.D. Because it was written back then, it's a modern translation or modern text that may have come from Satan himself trying to confuse us with the Word of God. So, again, I would stay away from that myself as much as I stay away from the Kabbalah, the secret teachings that Solomon knew about, because he went very bad and mad at the end, involving himself even in child sacrifice because of his experimenting and reading into these things. So I steer people away from that. I'm sorry, I can't support that.
Oh yeah, no, I was just wondering, just what you thought about it. I'm not giving any credence to it at all. I don't know myself, but it seems to support. Have you heard of the Testament of Amram? It's part of the pseudepigraphal works.
Say that again.
The Testament of Amram. It's Amram was the father of Moses, and there's a pseudepigraphal book that has a passage in it which seems to be linked kind of to what is revealed in these emerald tablets. And I'll read that for you just real quick, and then get you
was that also written in was that an Arabic document as well?
Oh, I don't know as far as what it was, the original language that it was written in. I just know that it was part of the pseudepigraphal works. But the only reason I'm mentioning these is because it seems to talk about the reptilians, and I just wanted to get you to comment on what you thought about as far as the nature of the reptilians, and do you think that we're actually dealing with some kind of presence like that on the planet today?
Well, whether we know about it or not, or whether they're in positions of leadership in various countries in the West or otherwise, I don't know. I could only guess at. But certainly there is that reptilian DNA presence in the alleged alien presence here on the planet, as far as I can tell. I don't think I ever met, but I met two people who I thought might have been part of the reptilian DNA when I was in the organization, and I couldn't swear to it. Their eyes were normal like ours. They didn't have slit eyes or anything, but their skin did have kind of a very kind of light, sparkly rainbow effect when they turned in the sun. And I was told that this is because they had small scale-like cells there rather than the kind of cells that we have for our epithelial cells, and that caused the refraction of the sunlight to make it look kind of shimmery like an thin oil film on their skin. Other than that, I don't know if I've ever met one, and I don't know, if the monarchy of England, for instance, is a bunch of alien shape-shifting reptilians. I've heard that kind of stuff, but I treat that in kind of the nonsensical area, because no one, no human that has worked close to the royal family has ever leaked out with anything like that. There was no mistakes made. They never saw them in that form. But as far as having DNA cross with humans, with all the abductions that have been taking place with the UFOs and the gray critters and this kind of stuff, and doing genetic experiments on our women and our men, I have no doubt that there could be a strange seed in our DNA now, having been put there perhaps for reasons unknown to us, but in Satan's purpose to enhance his chances of winning the battle against the Messiah when he returns. I do caution you about these books that are Arabic origin, because this, it's a branch of things that are definitely anti-Christian, anti-Jewish. Like, for instance, that thing we were talking about with the Emerald Tablets. Well, then if you go to the Tablets of Amram, or the account of Amram you're talking about, this is part of the Quran in the third surah, where they talk about the house of Amram, and they equate him to Adam, Noah, Abraham, and Amram is the fourth. Now, it just seems to me that this is part of an Islamic attempt to, the fundamentalists of that, to steer us away from what the Bible tells us about the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Maybe I'm wrong, but I instinctively kind of treat this kind of document with caution because of the source of them. When they start talking about finding a scroll or whatever it is, a tablet, under the statue of some god, or I don't know how they did this Amram thing, but I just have to be cautious about that, and I encourage you to be just as cautious.
Oh, absolutely, and I appreciate your warning. I'm not. Again, I'm not giving any kind of credence to these particular texts. I just find it interesting that there are mention of these reptilian type beings in them, and it seems
True.
like. Well, I was just going to, and then you can comment on this, Stan. I was just going to say that it seems like there are, even in the, people that are, like Christine Fitzgerald, she gives us a testimony. She was the confidant of Princess Diana, and she gave an accounting of that that the royals might be associated in some way. And I know there's a lot of that happening on YouTube where people are speculating as to this, and I'm not saying one way or the other that this is true or not. It's just it's fascinating to me that there seems to be some kind of weirdness associated to that seems to be coming out in this last day and age, and so people have been speculating as to whether the royals and the New World Order, if they are connected in some way to the reptilians, and even whether the Greys themselves are some kind of a reptilian type being. Comment on that, Sam?
Well, the gray critters, I'm reasonably certain, are created by Satan, and they are serving a purpose, and that he has to fake or make a fake everything miracle-wise before the thing actually is done by the Elohim or by Jesus, Yeshua. Now, to that end, when Satan comes posing as a little g God, our creator, he has to fulfill what a lot of Christians and Jews and other followers of the ancient works are expecting, and he has to get rid of an evil source on the planet, alien source, and that is the little gray critters. He's created them to produce data that he needs on the genetic manipulation, but at the same time, he has made them the enemy of humanity, even though it's not officially declared. And I think they're biological robots, or like cyborgs that he's created without souls, just to go do his bidding, and to gather the data and to serve as bad guys that he can vanquish when he takes over the planet and protects humanity from these bad gray critters, fulfilling what Satan is himself going to be when Jesus comes back to kick him out. So he's doing an imposter-type Messiah rival, and he had to have a bad race of beings to defeat. That, I think, is where the Greys have been brought into the picture in modern times. And even though they could have been, testing on mankind for generations and perhaps even millennia before that, but not as intensely as they are now, and as intensely covered as they are now due to the increase of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge across the planet with the electronic age. That's what their purpose is, and I think that they will certainly be dealt with by Satan, to impress the humans that he has done a kind thing and a good thing, and that he will protect people that aren't aware of this deception will fall prey to it and believe a lie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you tell us, Stan, because I know that we're quickly running out of time, and there's a lot of new listeners and a lot of people in the chat room that have joined us just recently. I know you've summarized this in what you were speaking about with your first book, Cosmic Conspiracy, but what do you see unfolding over the next few years as far as the strong delusion and how that will be played out? If you could just comment on that some.
Okay, I will. I just want to finish up our touching on the Amram and on the Emerald Tablets before that. There are certainly pieces of literature that have not made it into the mainstream or into the accepted biblical collection of books. Some of them, I think, have valid input, but I think that it is certainly something that a serious student of the Hebrew, perhaps the Arabic and the Greek, would look at and study at great length before sharing it with the general Christian community or our Jewish community, because it is stuff that's in rabbinical literature and apocryphal literature that is suspect, because the writers are not known to be somebody that's trusted or authorized to be a prophet of God, etc. So, as I advise people to avoid Kabbalah, even though there are some truthful things in there, avoid it because we are told to avoid it because it will warp your mind and drive you mad. So I do say study this kind of stuff with caution to your listeners if they're out there, thinking, okay, I'm going to go grab the Apocryphal Testament of Levi or whatever and, believe that instead of the Bible. These things have to, any of these extra-biblical books have to be compared to the canon literature and see where they differ, and then challenge that difference to see whether it is true or not by referencing other works. And it's a lifetime work almost to do that properly. Anyway,
Absolutely.
Now what do I see happening here in the immediate future? Well, I think in the next year or two we're going to see an official announcement of the quote-unquote alien presence, an admission by the governments that yes, we've been covering it up, and I think that we're coming in this year and early next year, we're coming into a situation where Israel will have to make a preemptive strike on Syria, perhaps in Damascus, or against Iran, or both, to defend itself against either a nuclear or a biological warfare attack from Iran or from Syria, whoever's in control of it at that time. Now, when that happens, when Israel strikes one of those two countries or both, militarily, it may be with a nuke. I mean, there's an old prophecy in the Old Testament that says that Damascus will become a ruinous heap overnight and will never be occupied again. Now, that sounds like a nuclear destruction of the city. Now, when that happens, the Russians have treaty agreements with Syria and with Iran and several other Middle Eastern countries to come to a mutual defense of them against their enemies, in this case, Israel. Russia is already making overtures in Cyprus after the recent banking crisis to help Cyprus and to come and occupy parts of Cyprus with their troops and other facilities like military facilities, to use Cyprus as a strategic or even a tactical base for defending Iran and Syria against Israel. So that is forming right beneath our very feet. Right now, as we watch the evening news, it's happening. The Bible tells us that Russia and perhaps several other countries in Europe will join with Russia, maybe even Turkey, maybe Germany, to attack Israel. And on the mountains of northern Israel, they will die. And their death will be a strange death, like a miracle almost. And like either all or majority of the Russian army will be destroyed in that. And the reason that I say it's strange is because for 7 months after that, they will send out teams, Israel will, send out teams of spotters to spot dead bodies of the invaders, mark the spot for burial details to get to later, as though they couldn't bury them themselves because of either infection or radiation or whatever, I don't know. But they will mark the dead bodies, and they will be buried then for a period of 7 months. Over those 7 months period, they'll bury all the invading army, and that they will also burn the leftover weapons of war that are flammable. They will burn them as firewood for 7 years after the invasion, which is at the same period of time as the tribulation period spoken of. So I see that starting almost immediately. But before the Russians can attack anybody, Israel and the Middle East particularly, they have to be sure that the United States will not attack Russia in defense of Israel. Now, with our current White House administration, that's probably not too likely, because our administration favors the Arabs over there, the Muslim countries, rather than Israel. But should the government change, the Russians look at it, should the government change, enough of America is pro-Israel still, that America could be a real threat militarily to their defending their treaties with the Middle Eastern countries over there. So America has to be removed as a major world power, military power, before Russia can invade Israel. That means that this year sometime, I'm pretty sure that we're going to get struck here in the United States with terrorism, with nuclear attack, something, and civil disobedience, civil war, that will totally divide our people. And a house divided cannot stand against external enemies. That's when we will either be invaded by Russia or China or a combination of them and some Middle Eastern countries, and America as a major world military power and economic power will be finished. That has to happen rapidly before Russia can even think to attack Israel. So that's what I see the next year or two. We're seeing very turbulent times, and after the threat of nuclear war in the Middle East, we're going to have to see, and the start of nuclear war, we're going to have to see the alien card played, where the aliens under Satan come to save mankind from their terrible future. And that's kind of the summary of it right there.
Excellent. Well said. And that leads me to what will be probably the last two questions that we'll be able to ask you, Stan. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us and to speak on all that you have. And we appreciate all of your work as well. But do you think that Revelation 17 and 18, Mystery Babylon, that New York City, the city of kings, that also will be taken out? The reason I ask is because just over a month ago, I had a dream of the East Coast being attacked in what was a large destruction, and it seems to be associated to that. And then one final question after
that. Well, certainly there is a province in New York State called Babylon, or like a county or whatever you want to call it. And the Statue of Liberty is a woman and sits upon many waters, and the United Nations is located in that area. But as far as its extent economically, extends over to the city of London, the financial city of London, as well as to New York, and that both of them may be taken down in this kind of a destruction by fire in 1 hour. The British they control over 1/3 of the world merchant shipping. The city of London controls our Federal Reserve here in the United States, and hence heavy on the policy of the United Nations as far as what the U.S. input is. So both of those areas could be part of the Babylon that is destroyed as an economic system. At the same time, as that is destroyed, I see that there are going to be other major cities and military facilities in the United States that will be subject to destruction as well. Otherwise, we might rise from the ashes like the phoenix and strike the Russians in the backside, but that's not going to happen. So your dream is interesting. I've also had dream visions of a nuclear bomb going off in New York years ago. Under different circumstances, but it makes sense that would be a target. And we might also see more than that, an EMP bomb going up several hundred miles in the atmosphere over the United States and causing failure of our electronic systems and our power grid, which would result in fires starting out everywhere from the shorting of the line, the transformers blowing and overloads everywhere. That might also contribute to America or to Babylon burning. So either nuclear or EMP and or both, I think, will probably be the result of what you were dreaming.
Yeah, I actually had a dream about 2 weeks ago about waking up and the light switches weren't working in the house, and I called the electrician out to come and look at what was going on, and what he had found out was that all of the outlets, the electrical outlets, had been burned out, and then in the dream I realized that I wasn't the only one, that the entire neighborhood had been shorted out in such way. And so when I woke up, I realized that it had to have been associated to an EMP in some way.
Well, and then Holly was just telling. Yeah, go on.
Go ahead, man.
Well, Holly was just reminding me that when you have an EMP attack like that, another thing to consider is that it will destroy the backup power or the main power to all the nuclear reactors we have in the country. And once they run out of fuel for the backup diesels and run out of energy to pump the coolant in there to keep it cool until power returns, once that happens, you can have meltdowns and explosions under certain circumstances of all these nuclear reactors, which would also pollute America to the extent that there would, nobody would ever want to live here again in those places because of the radiation byproduct that might last thousands of years. That's another factor that would indicate that EMP thing you're talking about might be real, might be the cause of it.
Right.
Now, you were going to say something else. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that, we have the vision of Dmitri Dudelman, and then there's the prophecy that has been reported as George Washington, him seeing, the republic, the faltering, but rising again, sort of like what you were speaking of as rising out of the ashes, and that we were able to repel, this what could be the oncoming invasion. We know that the Chinese have a base. There's been a reported base just 60 miles south of Texas, there in Mexico as well, and we gave up our deep water ports in California and over there in the Bahamas, and the Russians are they just recently did another a third test flight where they simulated a nuclear strike on America. So all these things are definitely pressing. My last view, Stan, because I know we're running out of time, and I want to give you also, actually, if you would, first, can you go ahead and provide your website where people can support you, to buy your books, to donate, to support you and your wife and all the great work that you're doing and bringing forth and warning us and sharing all the information that you do. And then I want to ask you about the Locust Army as an ending question.
All right. Well, certainly, Holly does that website 6 days a week. She updates it, and the website is there to help people. You don't have to buy a book or anything. There's a lot of very important free information on the main website and on the preparedness website that she maintains underneath that, which you can get to by pushing a button on preparedness. But its main website is standeyo.com, and that's STANDEYO.com. And if you go there, whenever we find things that you need to know about, whether it's Holly's news gathering or whether it's something the two of us have determined or found, she'll put it up there on the website in a prominent place at the very beginning to say, look, this is important, pay attention to this. Also, we do have our books there, the Dare to Prepare book and the Cosmic Conspiracy book, plus some others that Holly's done on CD-ROM, like the Prudent Places USA, which tells you about where nuclear facilities are located in the United States and where various disasters are prone, like earthquakes, like tornadoes, lightning density, and during lightning storms, flooding, all that kind of 72 variables that she's covered in that. So go in there, read about these things on the website, and see if that can help you, and if it will, then buy those things and we'll send them off to you. I think that's basically where all of our information goes. Even my earthquake predictions are, Holly has a link to that on the front page right up toward the top as well. And we'd like to see you there.
Well, certainly I would encourage the listening audience to support Stan and Holly and all the incredible work that they do. They definitely deserve our support for being watchmen on the wall, sounding the trumpet, And all those that have called in, we won't be able to take your calls. We don't have enough time. Going into the last question, Stan, I wanted to play this real short clip of you commenting about the return of the Anunnaki, and then I wanted to ask you about the Locust Army. And for those that haven't heard this, it's a 45-second clip. It'll be real quick. We'll listen to this first, and then I'll ask you the final question.
All right. A number of things that I've heard from people in the Pentagon, that the buzzword in the secret of secrets in the Pentagon is the Sumerian gods are returning, and that's what they're referring to as that whole area that Peter's on.
Wow. Can you repeat that again, just in case anybody missed it? The buzzword in
the Pentagon, in the military circles that are in the know about the cover-up here, they kind of in whispered tones talk about the return of the Sumerian gods. And they're talking about what we would call aliens or fallen angels returning into the Middle East, into Old Sumer area.
The Anunnaki.
Well, could be.
Under the ancient names.
Do you think that has anything to do with why we're in a...
We've got 5 minutes left, Stan, and I just wanted to ask you if you thought that the return of the Anunnaki, the Sumerian gods, and the giants, if that was any way connected to what Joel chapter 2, what he speaks about as them, climbing up on the walls, falling on a sword and not being able to be killed, if that is an illusion as far as the biblical allusion to that whole connection.
Well, I don't know how you would kill them. Certainly the legends do support the fact that the Nephilim were hard to destroy, either by their size or so that swords and spears didn't really hurt them that much. As far as them being immortal type things, certainly coming from the heavens, Satan and his minions do have that capacity, because I think that Satan and those who are his close lieutenants for sure were around the time of the crucifixion. They were around the time of the Garden of Eden and before that. And so if those beings live that long, surely they're not going to be subject to death at the hands of anything that we're doing. And the return of the Sumerian gods statement, I got that talking to Linda Moulton. We talked by phone a few years back, and she'd been in the Pentagon just before that and had heard some of the generals talking about, in lower tones, the return of the Sumerian gods, little g gods. And these are beings that obviously had godlike qualities, like they had magic technology, and perhaps since they didn't die, that was pretty unique, which all adds to what you're saying from the book of Joel, that we might be seeing a return of these kind of beings. You don't want to be here when they come. They're going to make a mess of the planet, and they're going to afflict mankind horribly. Daniel, in the book of Daniel, it does speak about the fallen one coming, posing as an angel of light, a messenger of light, and as a little god, little g god. And I do cover this in the last chapter I've added of the Cosmic Conspiracy book, the very last appendix it is in the book. And I added that a couple of years ago after retranslating part of Daniel to warn people that these beings coming with Satan are going to be like iron compared to clay in strength over us. And we're like thin, fragile clay vessels. We can be broken and killed easily, but these beings cannot. So I think that it does support what you're saying there, and that we're going to see them in great number in some of the new 10 regions of the planet. As Daniel explains, there are going to be regions that are run by aliens and regions that are run by the Antichrist. And he gives peoples and lands in return for technology from the fallen one, Lucifer, Satan. That, again, encourages us to get right with the Lord and get out of here, get taken out of here before that happens, because they are going to treat humans like fodder, it says in Daniel. It's just really bad. I encourage you to look at that in the book.
Thank you, Stan. We appreciate you. And I want to just reiterate what Stan said as far as the extra biblical books and all of that. Please build your foundation on the Old and New Testament. Study the Word, and you have to know, because it covers all of the esoteric nature of all that we're dealing with. It's all there in the gospel, I know for many people that when you read it, it doesn't seem to make sense. But when you come to discernment, all these things will be revealed to you, and that you just have to seek and knock, and you will be led. And the Father and the Son, they will meet you more than halfway. God bless you, Stan. God bless your wife, and thank you for all that you do for the world. I pray for your protection and that of your wives and your family.
Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom, Stan.
Shabbat Shalom, Stan. We'll speak to you soon. God bless, brother.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Good night, all. We'll talk to everybody on Wednesday. I'll be on with the hijacker 12 to 2 a.m. We'll talk to everybody soon. And, again, don't believe anything that we say. Go out and do your own homework for yourself. Good night, all. God bless.